Hello everybody, welcome to the Wednesday Night Live. We're going to wait a couple minutes here for everybody to get in. I see we got people coming in, that's good. We'll just wait a couple minutes here for everybody to get into the room. I hope everybody is doing well. I hope you guys can hear me okay. And I see people are putting in mystery box, and that's fine. We'll take mystery box requests for 10 minutes, and I'll explain in a couple minutes once everybody's in here how the mystery box works. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us tonight. If you're just tuning in, we're going to wait just a couple minutes here. Tonight we're going to be doing the clay flower bowls, and I'm going to show you a couple different versions of doing that bowl. If you're new to our lives, we do the mystery box, and you'll see people are typing into the comments mystery box. And what that is it is a medium flat rate box that we have filled with goodies. There's about $100 worth of items in that box. And toward the end of the live tonight, we will draw a name. So everybody who types in mystery box in the comments, my wife Janine is here. She's going to put your name on a slip of paper. It'll go in a bowl, and we'll draw a name out of that bowl. And the person whose name is drawn has the option to purchase that mystery box for $50. It's $35 for the box and $15 for shipping. And if for some reason they decide they don't want that box, that's fine. We will just draw another name in there. So you need to be present to be able to win the mystery box. If we draw your name and you're not in the room and you don't comment that you're here, we're going to draw another name out. And we'll show you what's in the mystery box once we open that up. The hint that I'll give you tonight is it has a little bit to do with what we're doing tonight, but it's also got some other stuff. And a lot of times I feature new items in there, so there are some new items in that box tonight. So looks like we've got a good group. I see people still typing in mystery box. If you're just joining us for the first 10 minutes, and there's going to come a point where around 10 minutes, I'll look down at the clock here and I'll see what time it is, and I will let you know that the mystery box is cut off. So we're going to be doing the clay flower bowls. I'm going to show you a couple different versions of that tonight, and I'm going to flip the camera down and get started here. So I generally will work with some type of a ceramic bowl, and the reason I like to work with ceramic bisque as my form for this is because it will absorb the moisture of the clay, and I can leave the clay flower bowl right on this bisque plate or bowl, and I can even fire it in there if I want to for the greenware firing. So as far as transporting it, sometimes people look at these and they go, oh, those look like they're kind of fragile, and they are, especially if you go with a really big one. So bisque bowls will work really well. If you don't have bisque bowls, you must not do ceramics a whole lot if you don't have bisque bowls, but let's say you're doing a workshop with kids and you don't want to purchase 40 bisque bowls or throw 40 bisque bowls. You can use like plastic bowls, glass bowls, and what you want to do then with something like that is put paper, or a lot of times I'll take just a washcloth and put that inside there, and I'll put my clay, I'll form it inside there, and this prevents the clay from sticking to the plastic bowl. Plus, when it's ready to come out, you can just lift that towel right up, and the towel will also add some texture to the back side of the clay as you press it into that bowl. But tonight we're going to be working with a bisque bowl because that is easiest. And I've got all different types of bowls here. I've got a whole shelf in my workroom with different bisque shapes that I use as forms. So we're going to start out with this one here, and I'm going to show you how to do kind of a very basic kind of a flat bowl, not as full with all the petals like you see on this one here. All right. I'm going to be working with low fire moist clay, and so clay usually comes in block form like this in a plastic bag. I've got a bag here that's open, and I like to use my clay cutter. A lot of you have gotten these. These clay cutters are great because you can adjust this little bar and then there's a wire on here. It's like a giant cheese cutter, and you can adjust that for the thickness of the clay. And so I'm going to adjust this down to kind of the first notch that's on the side here, which is going to be a nice thickness for our clay petals. Let me lift this clay up on here. And so what you do is once you've got that set, you just drag that across the clay, and that purple bar slides across the top, the wire cuts through, and you get a nice even little slab of clay. So I'm going to cut several of these slabs of clay to set aside here. You can also, if you wanted, you could roll out a big slab of clay if you've got a slab roller or using a rolling pin. But I do like this clay cutter because I've been able to quickly slice off several even pieces of clay, and I don't have to roll it out and mess around with a rolling pin or a slab roller to do that. Bring my bowl back here. So we'll be working right on the bisque. I'm not putting anything on here. It's dry. I prefer dry versus a real wet surface because the clay is going to tend to stick more to a wet surface. Now, the petals that I'm going to do for this bowl aren't going to be real gigantic, so I'm actually going to take and just rip some pieces of clay off of here that will kind of be my petals. And I'm basically going to rip this piece of clay into 4 pieces of clay. I'm just going to kind of round off the edges of this and bring this down to turn it into my flower petal shape. I'm not worried about this being perfectly smooth because we're going to add some textures to this, but I'm going to make several petals like this. I could also lay this piece of clay down and use a wood tool or a needle tool to cut these to the shape that I want. Some people want to stack these on top of each other and make sure that they're exactly the same. They're flower petals. They're all going to be a little bit different. They might be shaped a little bit differently. They might be different sizes. Don't obsess about having perfect petals for this. And since the clay cutter sliced my slabs pretty evenly, I don't have to really worry about getting these uniform thickness. If you're not slicing it or using a slab roller and you're just taking a ball of clay and flattening them out, you want to have these petals pretty uniform in thickness, because if you get areas that are really super thick and areas that are really super thin, you may end up with some cracking as the pieces dry, if you get areas that are really thick and areas that are really thin, because the clay will dry in those thin areas faster than it will usually in the thick areas. And then as that shrinks, it cracks where the thicker areas, it's not drying as quickly and shrinking as quickly. And so that's why you want to keep them fairly uniform in thickness. Now I've got a whole bunch of petals here. I'm going to just start laying these into my bisque bowl, and I'm going to overlap them a little bit, and I'm just going to work my way around in here to see if I've got enough. And it looks like I might need one more, which I have one more piece of clay here that I can form. With this too, some people obsess about having a certain number of petals on here, and you know, some people are like, oh, you have to have an odd number. Let's see what I ended up with here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 in here, and I think this looks pretty good. If I wanted, I could squish it, you know, in and come up with an odd number. Usually, if it's like 4 and an even number, I think 5 looks better to have an uneven number. But when you're doing something this big, it really doesn't matter. Now, you want to decide with your flower petals. If you want to just have smooth petals, you can sit here and you can smooth these out and use ribs and tools and things to smooth these petals out to make your design. But I like to add textures, and so lots of different things can be used for textures. Things like lacy doilies. A lot of you have the rubber stamps work great for this. And then even unique things like I find these table centerpieces and things that I can press into clay to get some really unique textures. One of my favorite textures, and you've seen me use this in other webinars and lives, is this table runner that I got at Hobby Lobby, and this is like a kind of a heavy felt type thing. And so I'm just going to show you several different things here that you can do to add textures. Get my extra clay out of the way here that I didn't need yet. And I can put the texture in one side of the piece, or I can put it in both sides of the piece. And because this particular texture that I've got, I can actually just take and fold this over, and I can press. Underneath here, this blue material is actually craft foam that I get at like Michael's, Hobby Lobby. They sell it in 12 packs, or you can buy them individually. I really like those because they're smooth and they don't absorb moisture like canvas can do. And I want to make sure that this texture is in both sides.
Someone said they've been looking for that bowl and cannot find it, but that was a while ago, so I'm not sure which.
The bowls that I have here are just plain bisque bowls. They're not. Some of them are, I know, some Duncan bisque here. Some are some that I've cast. Some of them are from bisque imports. All right. We've got, Janine is done writing the names of the people for the mystery box, so we're closing that off. If anybody says mystery box, you guys can let them know they missed out on it, that they're too late.
Maybe you did this a while ago, but could you please bring the craft foam mat and plate closer to you? And then, okay, someone has to foam the cutter. Okay. But then Michael closer.
Yeah, this is just craft foam. So I'm going to switch this up a little bit. I'm going to, just so that you guys can see some other textures. We're going to do this one here. I'm just going to take the tag off. This was a placemat that I found at Walmart. Sometimes I walk through stores and I look at things and look at them differently, that I can use them with clay. I'm going to fold this over and do this on the other side. And what I'm doing is I go around the edge of the clay as I'm kind of tapering it. So you'll see me going along the edge, kind of pinching it down so that it's not so thick and clunky along the edge. And then I'm just watching to make sure that I get, yeah, this one doesn't leave a whole lot of texture. I'm going to see if I press it harder if I get it. And if I don't like the texture that this leaves, yeah, this one's kind of boring. I mean, I'll hold this up and you can, well, actually this side's got pretty good texture on it, so I will do a couple of them with this piece.
There's a question, can you give a rough estimate of the size bowl you're using, the amount of clay you'll be using for the project?
This bowl is, you know, a little bit bigger than my hand, so I don't have a tape measure here tonight. That's probably about an 8 to 10 inch bowl, and I'll probably use a total of about 3 pounds of clay for this one. Obviously, if you do something bigger, you're going to be using more clay than that. You know, and clay is pretty inexpensive when you look at doing projects like this. If you're looking at doing this as like a kid's project, clay is really pretty affordable for doing things like this. And your bisque forms that you use, those, even if they get, you know, a little bit of clay on them, that can just be wiped off. And those bowls, I reuse my bowls to do lots of clay projects, but some people will use them for a clay project and then they'll turn around and use that bowl for painting. They'll just sponge it off and get all the clay residue off, and they will do their painting on it and their glazing.
Someone said, I like that placemat. Did you purchase it recently?
Oh, that gold one? I think I found that. That was, I want to say around the holidays that I found that. Let's see what else we've got here. Okay, I've got some rubber stamps. I'll just show you all the different. These are placemat, or they're for like in a sink. If you want like a little decoration in the bottom of your sink, that's what these were.
Gripping more than decoration.
Well, I don't know.
So
It's a sink mat, large sink mat.
yeah, so plates and stuff don't crash against the bottom and
Oh, okay.
break. That's
And I've got
too.
this little flower one I thought was kind of cool. And I've got this pink flower one. So if you want color and cushion, go with the pink one. If you want, clear. So let's get some of these in. I'm going to just use this one here. It's got flowers and butterflies on it. We'll see how this one works out. Well, that turned out pretty cool. And we'll do one with this setup. This pattern was kind of cool.
Can you all hear me cutting apart the mystery box entries?
Janine writes all the names on a sheet of paper and then cuts them apart. We used to have little slips of paper that she would write them on, and then she's like, it'd be a lot easier if I just did it this way. And sometimes you have to be careful. These these sink things and that are plastic, and sometimes they will stick to the clay if the clay is real wet. And I think I talked about that I'm working with low fire clay. You can do this technique really with any type of clay. You don't have to use low fire earthenware. I think these bowls would be really cool done in some stoneware glazes. Now this one I'm using one of the rubber stamps on, and I'm taking it over the edge and doing the stamp in here. The bottom of this is going to pretty much be covered, so I'm not too worried about it. But if I was using smaller stamps, I could always go back and I could stamp in to the area like this. And here I want that edge beveled a little bit. I'm going to stamp. I could have other stamps underneath this as I'm doing that, so I would get a texture on both sides as well.
Do you have to have a lip on the bowl?
There doesn't have to be. I'm going to show the next one. I'm going to show in a bowl that does not have a rim or a lip on the edge of it. So I'm going to show you that one next, how that's done.
And then when someone wants to know if you could use a pony roller to get a texture on the clay.
You could use a pony roller. Yep. I just tend to use my hands to press that on there. And there are textured rollers out there as well.
Someone asked if I send you by yourself to a store to look for items for texture.
Huh.
Yeah, that's not my thing.
Yeah, Janine does not enjoy going to the store and looking at texture things with me. All right, so I've got my petals laid out here, and you'll see that they do hang off of the edge of the bowl. What I want to be careful of is that these petals don't wrap around that edge. As long as they're sticking up and they don't wrap around, I don't have to worry about them drying and shrinking and cracking and breaking off. So just be conscious of that. You can go larger than the bowl, but if I went way off the edge and this, oops, get that in the view of the camera, and this rolled over like this, as it shrinks in there, there's a good chance that some of these will crack. So if you have any trouble with them wanting to flop over the edge, you can stick some newspaper or some cardstock or a little piece of cardboard under there to hold it so that it doesn't flop over on there. Now, normally, anytime I would add pieces of clay together, I would do scoring and adding slip in between. But because the middle of this flower, I'm going to be putting a center in here, I can actually just take, and this clay is soft enough, your clay needs to be nice and soft, and I can take and I can just mash this clay together in the middle, and I'm just taking my finger and dragging it over the clay and kind of squishing where they overlap, and I'm dragging that clay onto the next one. So I'm going to work my way all around here where they overlap and just kind of drag the clay to squish them and attach them to the other side. And that's why when I said before, when I was using the stamp on that one, I wasn't too worried about that little area that didn't have a design on it, because I knew I was going to go along and squish this all together. And I'm just gonna, it's not about necessarily getting this smooth, I just don't want to see any lines where the clay pieces met up, and that way I know that they're attached well. Now I've got a little spot in the middle, and it's a little thin in the middle, so I'm going to add a little piece of clay in here, and I'm going to really squish this down nice and tight. And now this bowl, I'm sure somebody would ask if I don't talk about this, you know, would you use this with food? No, this isn't really a bowl that's designed to be eating out of. This would be more like a trinket type thing, something you could hang on the wall. I'm going to show you how to do a piece on the back of it to turn this into a garden stake so that you can put a copper pole or some type of a PVC pipe or something in the ground or a wooden stick and have this like something out in your garden or your yard. But this attaches it together well. Now, if I was doing a lot bigger piece, I probably would go and I would score underneath here and add slip where these pieces overlap. I'm not too concerned about this because this piece isn't too big. Now I'm going to take another piece of clay, and I'm actually going to just roll this into a ball, and it doesn't need to be a perfect round ball of clay, and then I'm going to take and I'm going to flatten this out.
Would this hold together as a planter for flowers?
Yeah, and if you were going to do this as a planter for flowers, if you were doing a little bit more of a vertical bowl, and these petals were up more, I would definitely score and slip in between there so that you would get a nice seal and water wouldn't get out, but that would make for kind of a cool piece, and maybe bring them up and have them flare out a little bit. Or this would be a good pedestal for to put a bowl, in the middle like this, and have a plant growing in there and have the flower coming out on the edges as well. I'm going to make this, flatten this piece so that it is about the size of my middle here. And I'm going to make it so that it's just a little bit bigger so it for sure covers everything. And I'm just going to flatten this a little bit with my fingers. All right, and that's about the right size. Now I am going to score this area because I'm going to add this piece of clay in, because I can't mash it down like I could squishing those petals together. So I'm going to use my handy dandy retractable scoring tool. A lot of you have gotten these. We've got these back in stock. And I'm going to score this area really nice. And any of the items that I'm using tonight are available on our website, learnfiredarts.com. And if you haven't shopped there after the lives in the past, we have a section in there that are the live event specials. And those are in the shopping area, and those will have all the items that I use that night that I talk about and show, and they will be numbered in that live event special area. And I just love this scoring tool because when I'm done with it, I can just kind of pull the clay off of it, slide that over, and it hides those tips in there. Can't tell you how many times I have poked myself when I go into my tools, and I've got drawers back there that are full of like needle tools like this, and I reach in and end up poking myself. Needle tools are great, but for scoring, I do like that. The other tool that I like to use is this one here. When we sell this one, this is a Kemper tool. This has a real hard wire, and this one too works really good for scoring, and you can bend these. They're bendable metal on there. And the other one is the Zim Tool, and this has a blade on this end, and then there's a needle tool on the other end, and they have this cool little rubber piece that goes right back on there that protects that so that you're not poking yourself with it.
Someone was wondering about, someone else answered, but can you kind of explain about if this will be saved later?
Yeah, so if this is your first time watching it, don't panic and think, oh my gosh, I have to create this or write this all down. This is recorded and it'll be available for viewing later. I've been putting all of the videos now on this is my personal page on Facebook, and I also have a business page of learnfiredarts.com on Facebook. There's a page for that, and I've been storing all the videos there because sometimes in my personal page they kind of get buried, and to explain to somebody how to get back to those videos going into the events, and it can be a little bit challenging for some people. I'm now adding some slip, and this slip happens to be a low fire earthenware slip that I use for casting molds, and I happen to know that that slip is compatible with this low fire clay body that I'm working with. You want to make sure that the slip that you use to do your attaching is compatible, and it's going to shrink at the same rate as the moist clay body that you're using. You don't want to use this low fire slip with a stoneware clay body, because when you fire it, there's a good chance that they will shrink at a different rate, and your centerpiece would probably pop off in firing. Plus, you'll see differences in the color of the clay as well. And this one is just an earthenware white clay. Now I've added that centerpiece in there, and then I'm just going to take, I've got a lot of different, and a lot of you probably have a variety of different wooden tools to add textures. And so a lot of times I'll take a piece of clay and I'll play around with different tools, poking them into the clay to see what type of textures I get if I poke it in this way, or I turn it on its backside and do it. All the different types of texture. And so if you play around on a piece of clay, you can get an idea of what you want to do in the center of your flower. And these come in, the wooden tools come in a set. Just reaching for it back here. This is a basic pottery tool set of wooden tools that we sell on our website. You'll see this under the event specials. And for the centers of the flowers, I like this one right here. It has this rounded end on it. So I'm going to do this one with this end, and I go around and I push this in, and I kind of give it a little twist as I'm doing this, and it adds a nice texture to the center. I'll show on a couple of the other flower bowls that I'm going to do different tools and different textures that you can do in the middle.
Someone was wondering if you use plain slip or if you add anything to it.
Nope, I don't add anything to the slip. That's a good question. It's just straight slip because I know that it will shrink at the same rate as my moist clay body that I'm working with here. So there's no additives or anything in there.
And any chance you would do a webinar or workshop on slip casting? Maybe when you get in there.
Yeah, that's a good question. Would I do a live or a webinar on slip casting? And I just ordered new equipment. I haven't had a new pouring machine in forever, and we just took on Layman Manufacturing has been making pouring equipment for a long time, and I've got a Layman pouring machine and a reclaiming machine, and it's kind of older, still works great, but I did order new equipment, so maybe once that comes in, I'll show you guys the new equipment and how that is done. So there's lots of tips and tricks to casting and taking out and adding pieces on, but this is basically it for this flower bowl. I'm just spinning it around here so you guys can see all the different textures. So, even though I did different textures on lots of these petals, I think it's kind of cool with all of those textures. And you can play around. And if you're doing kids, sometimes the bottom of their shoe has some of the best texture and some really unique texture. The next one that I'm going to show you using like a bark texture on the flower petals and things. You can also add leaves, and so a lot of you have the rubber leaf forms, or you can use real leaves from outside, and you can make clay leaves, and you could attach them so that they're coming out on here as well if you wanted. And so those would be made first and put in the background, and then you would score and slip your flower petals. Pull this back a little bit more, your flower petals on top of there. But just be careful that you don't get things that are sticking out too far on there, or that you get this so thick that the piece weighs 100 pounds by putting big leaves all over. So I did a workshop on this once, and I had somebody who seriously had I'm just grabbing all of my leaf forms here, they had giant leaves coming out all over around the piece and overlapping, and it was just like these giant leaves sticking out everywhere. You know, I probably would add about 3 leaves to something like this if I wanted to add some leaves to it. Now, I can also take and I can lift some of these petals and give them a little bit more of a curve or a wave to them. If I want to raise it up, and we had talked about, you know, making this more like a planter, you could raise these sides up. But if you put dirt in there, you'd be covering all of that up. But I do like the idea of a bowl in the middle of there with all those petals coming out and a plant, some spikes or something growing inside of there. So now this is just going to sit in here and it's going to dry, and I can leave this in here for a day, a week, a month. If I want, I can take this whole bowl and stick it in the kiln and fire it once it's dry. You got a question?
Yes, a couple actually. If you used air dry clay, how would you add the centerpiece?
That's a good question. If you use air dry clay, most air dry clays, if you wet them, they get kind of sticky. So kind of play around with that. Usually a little bit of water on there, and then put that in there. And when you go with the tool and you add your texture to the middle, it's going to create even more pressure that's going to attach that clay in the middle. That's a good question.
And does the clay you're using have a light grog in it?
This clay doesn't. This is just a smooth white. Like I said, any clay body really will work for this.
Then what cone would you fire that?
This one is a low fire, so this is going to get fired at 04. If I was doing a mid-range or a stoneware or a raku, think about these in raku, you guys who've done raku. These would be really cool in raku. If I was doing a mid-range, I would still be firing this to 04 for my first firing. And then, of course, I'd be going to like a cone 5, cone 6 if it was a mid-range clay, if it was a high fire, you know, all the way up to cone 10. But this is just earthenware that I'm working with. I will be doing some in stoneware as well, and playing around with some of those new Mako stoneware glazes on there.
Someone asked if you'll cover it with plastic.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Will I cover this with plastic? Generally, the area that I set these to dry are in a room where there's no air vents blowing, there's no fans blowing in there. So I can safely set this in there, and I'm not worried about it drying too fast in some areas because there really isn't a lot of air movement in there. If it was an area where there was a heat vent or air conditioning vent blowing, or there was a lot of movement in that room, I might take and throw some plastic over it loosely. But remember, the point of using the bisque bowl is that bisque will absorb moisture from the backside, so you don't want to smother this with plastic and get it real tight with plastic, because it's going to start drying from the backside, the moisture will come out, and it'll start to shrink on the back. And if the top is covered with plastic and you put plastic wrap all over this tight and the moisture can't get out, you will have issues with cracking because it'll be drying on the backside and not on the top side. But if you start to notice that, you know, the tips start turning, usually when clay dries it gets lighter in color. If you start noticing the tips are getting really light and the middle is still really dark, you can throw a plastic bag just loosely over the top of it.
Okay, and then, do you weigh it to determine how heavy it is?
As far as, you know, some people will weigh out the clay ahead of time. You know, they'll kind of figure out, like, okay, here's how much clay I used for this. They'll weigh it out and sell it as a kit or as a workshop. They give everybody a certain amount of clay, and they say, that's how much clay you have to make your piece. My feeling is clay itself is pretty cheap. It's the shipping that's usually the killer on it. And so I'm usually not real tight with how much clay I give people to work with. I usually, if I'm doing a workshop on it, I'll kind of walk around and I'll kind of keep an eye on pieces. And a way to check the thickness, sometimes I'll take my needle tool over, and I will take a needle tool and I will poke it into the clay, and then I run my finger down to the surface, and then I hold my finger there and I pull it out. So I know that the clay in that area is that thick. And I may randomly do that in a few areas just to see if it's uniformly thick, because some people tend to go a little crazy, or I start seeing them pinching the clay so much that it's getting super thin. And so I'll usually warn people, you know, you're getting a little thin there. But I don't I don't weigh it before or after, but if you're asking because you're wondering like how much clay should you allot for each person, you could weigh it out ahead of time. Most clay comes in a 25-pound block, and you could cut it into, 4 pieces, 5 pieces to give out for a workshop.
On that note, they were a little bit late, so they wondered how much clay is in this piece.
I think I figured there was probably about 3 pounds of clay in here.
Okay, and how would you treat the back of the flower to hang it on a wall?
So if I was going to hang it on the wall, I'm going to show you guys, for hanging it on a wall, the best way to do it is to take nichrome wire, which is a fired wire, and I would have put that in the back side of this, or I can take this out at this point, I think. I can pop this out, and I could take that wire and make a loop and insert that. And usually when I do that, I should have had some of the nichrome wire here to show this. If you make a loop, so I'm going to just pretend that my finger and my thumb here. So if I make a loop and I have a tail sticking down on here, we'll make it like, there's a tail coming out this way. You know what? Give me a piece of paper and a pen. I'll just draw this out. That'll be easier than trying to show with my finger. Can I have a pen, please? So if I make a loop and then I have like this little, it's twisted together here, and I just have, a straight piece, and I stick that into the clay, what's going to happen when I hang that on the wall is there's a good chance this whole loop's just going to pull out of the piece. So if you make a nichrome wire loop, make sure that you have parts that stick out on there. So as you stick that into the clay and you press that clay against there, that wire is sticking out in different directions and it can't just pull straight out of the piece. I hope that makes sense. Now, if I was going to turn this into a garden stake, and the other option for this, if you didn't have nichrome wire, you could put some holes in the back of this, and sometimes just taking a needle tool and kind of feeding it through like this and opening up a little channel in there. You can then take a piece of wire and feed it through after it's fired. You generally want to do it toward one side or the other. Don't do it right in the middle. If you do it right in the middle, your piece is going to want to kind of spin on the wall, and you want that to hang. And the last type of thing that I would do, there's lots of different hooks and things out there that you could glue onto the backside, but I always worry about pieces. They're a little bit heavy of those hooks coming off regardless of the glue. I mean, like those 3M strips, they say that you can put those on and you can peel them away, and we've got some hooks and stuff that we've had for years and they hold well, but I don't know. I'm sure there comes a point where it doesn't hold or it gets bumped just right and it wants to come off.
As far as the weight goes, the person who asked about that wants to actually know how much it weighs after it's made.
It depends how big your piece is as far as how much it weighs. So this is, there's about 3 pounds of clay in this. Once it dries and that moisture goes out of it, you're probably under 2 pounds. And, but if you do a really big one, obviously it's going to be a lot heavier. All right, so if I want to make a garden stake out of this, and I want to stand this up out in the lawn that it'll stand up like this on a post, on the back side of this, I'll make I rolled kind of a ball of clay, and I'm going to flatten one side of it. So this side, I flatten. This is the part that's going to go against, I'm going to use this stamp like it's my flower, it's going to go and attach to the back side of this. Now I want to take, and I'm going to do what I would call a pinch pot, where I'm just going to take my thumb and kind of insert it in here and work it in and open this up. If I've got a couple pieces outside that I've done this with, I use copper pipe to do this because it's pretty strong, and usually like a 1 inch to 2 inch copper pipe is going to work best. So you want to make sure that this little indentation that you make in here is bigger than your pipe, because remember, this is going to shrink as it dries and it's going to shrink as it's fired. And I know somebody's going to say, well, what percentage does the clay shrink? Every clay body shrinks at a different rate, and so most clay manufacturers have a chart that will tell you what percentage the clay shrinks. I generally just make it bigger than it needs to be. Yeah, bigger than it needs to be, because I know it's going to shrink. And if this opening is still bigger than my pipe, I'm going to fill this up with glue. I see somebody asking about E6000 glue. And so I would ooze this full of glue. I would put that pipe inside there. We'll pretend that this little extruder is my pipe. I would put that in that glue, let that dry in there, and then I would attach that flattened side to the back side of my flower. And then my post is going to go into the ground, and then this will stand like this.
Like fire it separately and then...
Yeah, fire it separately, or if if I attach this to the back of this flower in the clay stage, it's not gonna sit flat, and you might have some challenges firing that and stilting that. So I generally do this piece separately, really goop this up with like E6000 or a real good glue that's going to hold up outside, and then that's how I stake those to put them outside.
Someone also suggested making a hanger out of clay and attaching it, even though it wouldn't hang flush against the wall, but...
Yeah, yep, you could. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Or you can put them in stands. I've got a lot of metal stands, and they can stand up in the stands on the shelf as well. All right, I want to show you guys a smaller, more vertical bowl here, and I'm going to basically do the same thing starting out. I'm just tearing off pieces of clay, and I know some of you are like, oh my gosh, you need to lay that down, and you need to cut those perfectly so they're all the same. And this one is going to be a little bit shallower bowl, and we're going to make layers to these petals. So I'm starting out with the petals that will be on the furthest outside edge of this bowl, and so those petals are going to be a little bit bigger than the ones that I'm going to make in the middle of the bowl. And oh my gosh, look at, I'm making some that are even smaller and not as big as the other ones. All right, I'm going to do the same thing with adding texture to these. I'm going to use on this one, I'm going to use the bark texture pad, and we're still not caught up on these bark texture pads, so I'm using one that is broken, but they still work great. And I just take and I press this against there to pick up that bark texture. And again, I'm kind of beveling the edge, and I'm only going to have texture on the one side of this. If I wanted texture on the other side, I could take something like this washcloth and press that on the back side so I get that texture, but I'm not going to take the time to do that. I just want to get these petals made. I'm going to set these aside. Some of you know that yesterday was Janine's 39th birthday.
29?
Oh, 29. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. Boy, am I in the doghouse. 39. She's only 29.
Luann asked me if I had to pack boxes or if I got to go out for dinner. I took the night off.
She did take the night off. She didn't do, but then she had to do labels this morning.
I was off today, so I was able to catch up this morning. He wouldn't let me shower until I got all my work done.
I kept taking more boxes in and more sheets that she had to do labels for. She thought she was done and was going to be able to get in the shower, and I'm like, nope.
The camera's facing down.
All right, so now I've got the bark texture on these petals, and I'm going to take and start standing these up in this bowl, kind of overlapping like I did with the other ones.
Thank you for the birthday wishes.
And I'm going to kind of do the same thing where I'm going to mash these together around the bottom. I'm not worried about the middle on these, or about the middle of the bowl, filling that in, because I'm going to do more layers of petals.
I'm getting more attention than you are.
Oh.
There's
Hey.
someone who's been 29 for a really long time, they said.
Oh.
Me too.
I turned 28 last month, so.
Oh yeah, I'm robbing the candle.
Now these petals are going to get a little bit smaller. I'm going to do, and you know what I might do instead of doing the bark texture on this next layer, I'm going to pick a different texture. And what do we want to do on those? You know what, I'm just going to do some of the stamps here because the petals are going to get a little bit smaller. So I'll set a bunch of stamps out and just press my petals against these to pick up different textures.
No, I'm not a cougar. He's actually older than I am. There you go. He's lying.
And sometimes I'll press stuff against a stamp and I'll be like, oh, yeah, that one doesn't leave me a nice texture, and I don't use it again, or I smooth it back out and repress it onto something else. So I'm gonna forgot to round the edges of this one before I.
Did you say you have a Facebook business page?
Yep, it's learnfiredarts.com. If you go and you search in the search field up on the left-hand corner of the page and just search learnfiredarts.com, and that's where I've been storing all of the videos for now. I've gotten one of them up on the YouTube, on my YouTube page, but I'll share that page once we get a bunch of videos up there, rather than just one video at this point. I've had too many orders to have time to get that done. I'm not complaining.
Suzanne Randall said she's a heavy builder. She hasn't fired anything because she's still worried about it being dried out.
Well, and that, you know, that's a good thing. So it's better to wait. If you're not sure if your pieces are dry, I did a video one week when I wasn't scheduled to do a live, and if you didn't see that, go back and watch that video, because, well, you'll probably never want to fire your kiln again if you watch that video, because you'll be even more afraid. But I put the wrong program in the kiln. I have a program in there to heat up to 190, 180, 190 degrees and hold for a certain number of hours. And I hit the wrong program number, and it was one that heated up to 190 degrees for an hour, and then it went right into the full firing mode. And I heard it sounded like popcorn popping in the kiln. And so watch that video and learn how not to do it. So if you've got a kiln, a digital kiln, you can program it to fire up to about 180, 190 degrees for a certain number of hours, and that would be in like the ramp hold feature. And no, if somebody's looking at the Facebook page, there is a Facebook page that is Learn Fired Arts, and then there's learnfiredarts.com.
Oh, those are, okay.
When we were doing educational events out in Fresno, California, we had set up, because I did the website Learn Fired Arts, and so they set up a Facebook page for those educational events, and so yeah, that does create some confusion when people go in there. But watch that video on the programming, and you can program your kiln to go to 180 for a certain number of hours, and that way you for sure those pieces are dry and you have very little risk of them blowing up in the kiln. Now I just set a second layer of petals in there, and you can see those petals are a little bit shorter than the first ones, and I'm going to do the same thing of going in, and I'm going to press and squish that clay together. Yeah, Daisy's upstairs wanting someone to come up and,
Almost an hour.
yeah.
Someone ordered your bisque molds. Do you have videos Any instructions or videos for using those?
On the
The
Learn,
mixing bowls.
yep, on the Learn Fired Arts, there is a video, learnfiredarts.com, there is a video on making the baskets, and I'm trying to think what else you can do. There's one on there that just shows using like an extruder to do coils and things. So there's, yeah, there are some videos, and there's lots of videos on the basics of clay puzzling on that page as well. Now I'm going to do,
How do you do that drying technique with a manual kiln?
Oh, so with a manual kiln, if you want to do the drying technique with a manual kiln, depending how big your kiln is and how many switches you have on it, you may end up putting like one switch on low, probably the bottom switch if there's multiple switches on the kiln, and just kind of keep an eye on it. And I always recommend having a pyrometer, a digital pyrometer, which I do happen to sell on my website as well, so that you can monitor the temperature in there. If you get up over 200 degrees, you start running the risk of pieces getting too hot, and the moisture that's in there will turn to steam, and it kind of expands and will cause pieces to pop. So you don't want the kiln to get too hot. So if it's a big kiln, one switch on low, you might be okay with that. It might be a matter of you have to turn it on low for a half hour, flip it off, turn it on low for a half hour. I suggest you buy a new kiln, make it a lot easier. No, I'm kidding. It can be done, but you really need to have, you should have a pyrometer to know the temperature. The other thing you can do if the kiln gets too warm with just one switch on low, you can prop the lid open so that the heat kind of escapes and the moisture escapes from there. I usually prop the lid on my kilns that aren't vented. On my kilns that are vented, I have it programmed to turn that vent on, and it sucks that moisture and blows that right out of the kiln as well. All right, so for the center of this one, rather than doing a ball of clay with texture, you can add kind of dimensional centers. And is there...
The magic drying temperature is 180
usually I put 180 to 190 in that range. If you put 190 in the kiln and it's a digital kiln, there's a good chance it's going to get over 200. So program it for 180, and there's a chance it's going to get up into that 190 range at some point. Oh, I see who's asking. Barbara's asking that. Yeah. So, yeah, with your manual kilns, Barbara, just you might have to play around, and I know you've got different size kilns as well. So. All right, so I'm going to do the centers in this one a little bit differently, and I'm going to use an extruder to extrude, and I'm using the spaghetti die. Now, the spaghetti die comes with the Shimpo. Nidec is the Nidec Shimpo. It's the same company that makes these extruders that we can't get right now. We took as many as we could get, and there's more coming in the first part of June, so we should have them again by the middle of June. But I've also got somebody, we just posted on the website today, a new die of just this die, and it's interchangeable with the Kemper extruder.
Someone just asked if you sell that.
Yeah, and because we do sell this one, it comes in a set, and so the Shimpo extruder comes with, I think, like 6 different dies, but there's some in there that people are like, I will never use the triangle die, and so they don't want to buy that whole set of dies if they have a different extruder, if they didn't buy this extruder. So we have these coming. I've got somebody that is 3D printing these for us that will be able to sell these individually, and we should have those soon. So if you haven't used an extruder before, there is a trigger on the end, and they're all very similar, where you push that trigger in and you pull this plunger out, and this might squeak. And usually I hold it down at my side so I can get really good leverage to pull it back. And I think this is... So here's what can happen. I don't clean my extruder out. Some people take this all apart and wash it out. I generally just squeeze all the clay out of it, and then when I go to use it the next time that clay's dried up in there, I just kind of tap that, give it a couple squeezes, get that loose clay busted out of there, and I reload it. So in the end of the extruder, there's a plunger that goes from the bottom side as you squeeze that trigger, and it pushes the clay up until you get to there's no clay left in there. So to release this plunger, you push that trigger, pull back on this lever, and it sometimes, this might be Man, this is really sticking. Usually I don't have this problem with it. I just got to loosen this up. I must have some clay in here. I'm going to add a little water.
Luann thinks you're more fun when you're not distracted with packing because she can bug you more and chat with you more.
Yeah, I'm going to be packing for years, Luann.
Someone wants to know if you sell a die with the holes for the clay puzzle.
There are lots of different dies on the website, and the extruders, like the Kemper extruder, comes with an assortment of dies, of the circle dies, and I use those dies more frequently, but I use this one a lot for like these flower centers, beards on gnomes, hair, things like that. And so I really wanted to be able to just have that die separately to be able to do with the other extruder as well.
A couple people are suggesting if you washed it out, maybe it wouldn't stick.
Yeah, well, all I had to do was put a little water in there, and it just loosened that clay up in there. Every once in a while, I do break down and wash it out, but it's not that often that I do that. All right. I don't need a lot of clay, so I don't need to fill this whole tube with clay, but I'll just take some clay and I'll squish it into kind of a tube shape that will drop down inside here. The little die attachment goes into the cap that screws on here, so that drops down inside. This gets screwed on, and then most people tend to want to squeeze this like it's a gun, and so they'll hold it this way upright. I'm going to turn it a little bit to the side here so you can see, but they'll hold it this way as they squeeze the trigger. I find that some people have a harder time if their hands aren't big, if they're not real strong, if they have arthritis. Some people have some issues with it. So sometimes turning this upside down, I can get better leverage. Or if I really struggle with it, I can put this plunger on the table. And I'm going to flip the camera up here. And then, so this plunger is on the table, and my hand is on the lever, and I can push down this way, and my hand is just flat, that I can push down and get really good leverage with that. And so that plunger's on the table. So if you have a hard time squeezing it this way or this way, rest that plunger on the table, and then use your hand. And sometimes I stand up, and as I do that and the clay comes out the end, I just kind of hold my fingers around the edge so that they don't get caught on the edge of the extruder. Now for the center of this flower, I'm going to break off these little bunches, and I'm going to kind of pinch these together, leaving them loose on the end. And so how long these come out is really going to be determined by how deep my flower bowl is. So if this bowl was really deep, I might make them a little bit longer. If it was a real shallow bowl, these might not be as long as this. Let's see if 3 is going to be enough for this bowl.
Okay, someone asked if they could include something in the order they're waiting for, and I told them to email you about that.
Yeah, if you need to add to your order, just message me.
Kemper? I can find it. Do the Kemper dies fit in the Shimpo extruder?
They do. Yep, the Kemper dies do fit in the Shimpo extruder.
And other special are you going to have dies that are made for handles?
That is a really good question. I know somebody had been asking me about that, and it was, I think, through Messenger. And the thing with Messenger is I can respond to somebody, and then like 500 more messages coming in Messenger, and that gets buried. Where email, I can go back and search for stuff. So yes, we just put them on the website today. We have a new handle die, which I was going to show you guys toward the end. This is the new handle die, and I think I have enough clay in here to squeeze out a little bit of a handle to show you.
And let's see. Are those holes too thin for the puzzle ball?
The spaghetti, I call this the spaghetti die. This one, it really, those with that many coils as they come out, for the real small sphere shapes, these would be okay. But I like the ones that come with the Kemper extruder, the one that has the 3 holes. I like that one, and then there are 2 sizes bigger than that if you're doing bigger shapes.
And then, hopefully you'll understand this. Is there a die plate to make quick test tiles that would stand up, like the shape of an L?
Yeah, I know what they're asking. A die that would do the shape of an L for like a stand-up test tile. There is, in the Shimpo one, there is I brought all these dies because I knew people would ask what comes with them. So these are the dies that come with the Shimpo extruder. So there's a square, there's a triangle, there's this one I'm going to set aside, there's a large circle, there's the spaghetti, and then there's a blank die. And that blank die you can cut out any type of shapes you want. So I'm just thinking with this one, if you were doing a stand-up, so a stand-up kind of a flat, it would be wider than this, but this is kind of what you're looking for, I think, for doing like a stand-up test tile, but you'd want it to be a little bit wider. This one, you could extrude out a piece of clay like I did here with this handle, and then you could kind of bend it over and flatten it like this, and probably pretty easily make your stand-up tiles that would be, you know, this width, which is probably about 1.5 inches, if that's wide enough. Or you could take that blank die and cut out a bigger shape on there and kind of do the same thing of making a stand-up tile like that. All right, as Janine's looking through the questions.
There's a couple people asking about things to add to their order, and please just email Mike after.
Yeah, if you want to add to an order that you have, send me a message. It is possible to do that, and it's really not that difficult to do. But I'll give you a code that if you've already qualified for free shipping and you're not ordering $50 worth of stuff, that you can get, that you won't be charged for shipping. Then I'll give you a code to use.
When you 3D print these, will you be selling them separately?
The spaghetti one, this one will be sold separately. The orange one that I just showed you, the handle die, that one is separate on the website already.
Someone said they do make a stand-up test tile for a wall extruder.
For a wall extruder, yeah. I didn't know of any for a hand extruder for doing that.
And the handle die fits the Shimpo, correct?
Yep, fits the Shimpo and the Kemper. Yep.
Will a Dremel tool cut through the metal to make your own die?
If you have a bit that will go through metal, yeah. Yep. And these are like a soft aluminum. The Kemper ones, we sell a pack of 3 on the website, and those are like a steel type material. All right, so what I did for the center on this, I took a bunch of these little bunches of clay that I had, and I kind of pinched them together at the bottom. Now, if I stuck this in here, it's going to stick up too high, so I'm going to take my needle tool, and I'm going to slice this off. I'm going to flick out my retractable scoring tool, and I'm going to score the bottom of this, and I'm going to score the inside middle of my little flower bowl, and I'm going to add slip down in the bottom, and I'm going to set this down in there, and then I'm just going to take a wooden tool, because the slip will stick in the bottom, but I kind of want to work this in a little bit, so I'll take this tool around the edges and try to grab some of that clay and kind of press it down in. I might go a couple spots in between some of these and kind of press down in without disturbing these little coils to make sure that that's attached in the middle. And then I'll kind of go and I can arrange these. If some of them are sticking up a little bit too high, I might break a couple of them off to make them a little bit shorter. And that is my little dimensional. Now, obviously, bigger bowls, you can make bigger versions of these. You can make them so that they're more open and going over with a bowl with a ridge rather than a straight up design like this. So, play around with different size bowls. I've got some gigantic bowls that I pour, and some I've picked up some ceramic bowls that had really ugly finishes at rummage sales that I found, and on those again I just put a towel inside the bowl so that the clay doesn't stick. If it's a real big bowl, I use a bath towel to do it. On a small bowl, I'll use just a washcloth down in the bottom on there. But again, this is a bisque bowl. I can leave this sit in here. I don't have the clay coming over the edge and wrapping around. I can bring these out a little bit, but I don't want to wrap them completely so that they come over the edge. So I'll just kind of bend these out a little bit.
There's someone asking if the dies fit a Scott Creek extruder.
Yep, they will fit the Scott Creek as well. I've got all the Scott Creek ones here. They're all really very similar in size. The Scott Creek, I think, are slightly smaller, but they have a little bit of room in their extruder to fit all the different types of dies as well. Any other questions?
Someone asked how long this goes, and I said, well, it just depends. Usually an hour, but if there's lots of questions, it can be longer. So, looks good.
All right. So I'm going to show you guys a few of the...
How would you paint all those?
Oh, good question. Painting these. So the way I paint these is after they're fired, I thin down a product like Stroke and Coat Concepts, and I thin it about 50% color, 50% water, and I take a big brush and I kind of dab the color and I let it run and flow down into all of the crevices on there. And then I take a sponge and I wipe it back lightly so that the highlights come out lighter, and then the color kind of puddles in all the textures on there. And then I just apply clear glaze to that piece before I do my glaze firing.
Did you show a finished one when you started?
I showed it on the cover of the magazine. I did these years and years ago. This was from 2016. I did these. And so this is, and there are pictures throughout all the promotions that I did for this. And then inside here, I had done 3 different. I did one in purple, one in pink, and one in blue. And again, they were just done using thin down Stroke and Coat. On the center of the flower, I did the yellow, and then I kind of almost like dry brushed Stroke and Coat brown on the tips just to get a little bit of darker color on the tips.
Someone was wondering if there's a trick about how to do the middle one color and then, like paint the rest, paint the...
Yeah, so I did just the thin down color on the outside edge, wiped that back, then I did my yellow in the center, and then I highlighted with a little bit of brown, and I didn't do any wiping back on the yellow.
How does Stroke and Coat do with texture?
Stroke and Coat is great with texture. It will puddle in the crevices. You can also use like sheer foundations or a lot of the Envision glazes and products like if you're working with low fire, you can use elements. A lot of those will puddle in crevices or break in texture. If you're doing it in stoneware, there's a lot of really cool stoneware glazes that will break on the edges of texture and give you different shading and things on there. All right, while Janine's looking for more questions, I just wanted, people are always asking about some of the products that are used. So the clay cutter, that is available on the website. You'll see those on there. There are different tool sets. We finally have these back in stock. This is the basic tool set, and this has ribs and sponge and wooden tool, needle tool, a wire cutter, traditional wire cutter for clay. These are back in stock. You'll see those on the website. The wooden tools do come in a set of different shapes. Those are available. There is a mini extruder in addition, so if you're doing real small bowls, if you do like little trinkety type bowls with flowers, you might need something that will extrude smaller centers on the flowers. And so there is this mini extruder that, if I put a little bit of clay in here, I'm not going to load it up real big, but this one is great for real small pieces. You load the clay, it's kind of like a syringe. You press this and you get all of these little pieces of clay that you can do centers like I did on that last flower. So those are available. That scratch tool is also available for doing texture. The retractable tool is on there. The Shimpo extruders are on there. The Kemper extruders, and the difference between the Kemper and the Shimpo really is, I'm going to turn this up here, is the size of the extruder. So the gold one, the Kemper one, it holds more clay. They each come with different dies. You'll see that on the website. I do like this one, especially when I'm doing workshops, because I don't have to load it as frequently because it holds more clay. So I'm not pulling that plunger back and reloading it as frequently. The bark texture pads are available. Rubber leaf forms you'll find on there as well. Got another question?
Yeah, someone wanted to know if you could use cobblestone over it.
Yeah, Mako's
fashion.
Yeah, Mako cobblestone could be used over it. Now, cobblestone is going to take away from your texture because cobblestone is kind of a thick textured product. But if your petals were smooth and you did cobblestone over it, it would give you a really neat texture on there. If you wanted to do non-fired colors, dry brushing with acrylics, using fashion hues, translucents, doing translucent techniques, you can get some really cool colors. The thing with getting down in on a bowl like this, if you were to do, say you're going to stain it with acrylics and dry brush, you'd want to thin down your base coat so that it gets down into all those crevices in there and flood that in there. With fashion hues, you can only get down so far. So your base coat and even your antiquing, you would probably thin the antiquing and wipe it back and just let that antiquing kind of puddle down in the crevices on there. Any other questions?
Nope.
All right. One other thing or a couple other things I want to show you. We've had a lot of people asking for these. These are new. They're not new. They've been around for a long time. We just started carrying these. These are a plastic, I call it a tray. And what it is there's little spikes on here. And so you set this on your work surface. And when you're glazing pieces or staining pieces, you can set them on there, and it's like a giant stilt to hold the piece up so that you're not holding it. And if you're in a studio setting, these all lock together. They have little areas on here that have little spikes on there, so you can lock these together on a shelf and have a whole shelf covered with these. That when you're dipping pieces, you set them on here to dry. Those little spikes hold it up just like a stilt. Obviously, these don't get fired in the kiln because they are plastic.
Someone asked if you glazed the back. So that would work.
Yeah, I do, and unless if it's stoneware, then you're going to be dry footing when you do your glaze firing. One of the other last things I'm going to show is the triangle brushes. We've been out of these for a while. They were off of the website. I did a video showing how to use these brushes. They're a 3-sided brush for brush strokes. We did just get these back up on the website today. Those are back in stock. And then I had somebody asking earlier if I would have written instructions on this, and I happen to have copies of the issue of Fired Arts and Crafts where this was in, and this was actually the very last issue of this magazine that came out in 2016. And so inside here there's lots of different techniques and methods, and it includes building the flowers, shows kind of step-by-step all the images, talks about painting, finishing, adding parts on. And so I do have copies of these. We just put the final set. There's a set of 10 different issues of Fired Arts and Crafts that we just put up on the website. There's lots of great articles in here. Things like the bird hoses I did that a couple of weeks ago. The spheres, if you bought the sphere molds, this one has in-depth information on doing the spheres. I also cover crystal glazes in this issue because I use crystal glazes on those. So there's information on the glazing. There's information and step-by-step on the technique of doing the coils and lots of other great stuff in these. So there is a set of these on the website as well. All right. Who wants to do the mystery box? Anybody? Janine's got the bowl of names over there. I'm going to mix these up here. worry, I'll get them back in here if they fall out. All right, ready? We're going to draw out a name here. Kathy Owen.
Oh.
If you're here, Kathy, let us know. I'm going to bring the mystery box up and show everybody what's in here. And some of you may have noticed it's a different shape tonight. It is the big, it's not the big, but it's still the medium flat rate, but it's the more flat one. And I wonder why I did that. All right. So I'm going to start pulling stuff out of here to show you what's in here. All right, it's all pulled out.
Oh, someone wanted to know how they get their name in for the mystery box.
So the mystery box, you have to be in here for the first 10 minutes of the live event. Yeah, okay. All right, so if you're in here the first 10 minutes, you just put mystery box in the comments, and Janine writes her name down and puts it in a bowl. So the reason I had to go with a bigger box is because you get one of these cool little drying racks. I said there'd be some new stuff in this assortment and some stuff that we use tonight. There's also a long handle fan brush. This is great for getting inside of vases and deep pieces. It's got a blend of natural and synthetic hair on there, so it works really well for getting into tall vases and shapes and things. You also get 2 of these synthetic fan brushes, great for glazing. You're getting that texture scoring tool with the bendable prongs on it. You're getting a set of the wood sculpting tools. You're getting the basic pottery set. You're getting a copy of the issue that has this technique in it, which Kathy probably already has that one, but maybe not. And then you're getting a bisque bowl. And then there's also a detail brush in here, a number 2 brush. And that number 2 brush is for something really little that's inside of that bowl. It's a bottle of fired gold. And this is, if you guys have never used the overglazes, I did talk about this in one of the webinars. This is a bottle of it's real gold. And so we're going to wrap that very carefully in your box, Kathy. But it gives a very brilliant bright gold. And we started adding the overglazes on the website. We've got a kit, and we started putting them individually. We just got the premium gold in, so we've got the white gold, the bright gold, the premium gold, the mother of pearl, and the essence are all back in stock, and we'll be adding those individually on the website as well. And kind of a funny story that I'll share with you guys. We got our Mako order finally came in last week, and Mako now is bought the Duncan Color line, and they're manufacturing the overglazes now. And so there was this little box that was about 6 inches by 6 inches by about 4 inches high, and that little box was valued at over $1,000. And so there's been trouble with the freight companies because they're short drivers and they're trying to condense pallets. So Mako sent 3 pallets to me. 2 pallets arrived. And so they had rewrapped it. And so Mako let everybody know that they're wrapping their pallets with blue stretch wrap. So if your shipment arrives and it's got clear stretch wrap or anything but blue, it means that freight company repacked your skid. So the driver, he's bringing the skid to the back of the truck and stuff is falling off of the skid. It is wrapped so poorly. And he's like, man, these guys should really do a better job of packing these. And I'm looking at this little white box that I know has the overglazes in it. And that is on the top of the pallet and literally is sliding off the edge as he's bringing that out of there. There was 1 box of slip missing on one of the skids. So, but that little box could have fallen off anywhere along the way. It would have been over $1,000 worth of precious metals that were lost. So I was glad that those were still on there and nothing else was missing. So, got other questions have come up?
Well, are the magazines still available?
Yep, the magazines are on the website. I've got about 30 sets of them, and so they're a limited item. Once those are gone, they're gone, and there's 10 of them at $5.99 each. It normally would be $59.99. I think I've got them for about $20. I think $19.95 I did for the sets of them, and then there's free shipping if you go over $50 with any combination of items in the U.S. 48 and some items to Hawaii and Alaska as well.
Kathy loves it.
All right.
And then someone's trying to find that bisque bowl on your website.
I don't sell the bisque bowls, those little bowls. Any ceramic studio that has cast pieces, they will have those bowls. If you really have a hard time finding a bowl, just message me. I can get you a bisque bowl, but it'll. I don't have them listed on my website because I don't really sell a lot of bisque and plain shapes.
One quick other question: with items on back order, when do you bill the credit card? Immediately, or when it?
So unfortunately, the website does, because you go in and you pay for it, and it is billed immediately. We're almost caught up. We've got a few March orders that are still here. A lot of the orders from April have already shipped, and today I printed out the orders from May, and so we're pulling and shipping 2 different batches. There's ones that have the clay puzzling molds where things like the spheres, we're still behind on those. On the website now, if you order certain things, it'll tell you that those items won't be available till the end of May for some of those shapes. But if you're ordering things like brushes and colors and basic things like that we don't have to manufacture, most everything is in stock now with the exception of the Shimpo extruder. And so that stuff I had some stuff that people ordered yesterday and it shipped already today because it was in stock. So.
Can they get the code for the additional order?
Yeah, so if you want to add to an order that's already here,
I'll type it in.
The code is FS100, and so it'll give you an option at the end to do a coupon code, and if you put in FS100 and hit apply, it should take off any shipping, and that would just be in the US 48. If it's Hawaii and Alaska, if it fits in a flat rate shipping box, it'll qualify for free shipping.
And then real quick, what kind of clay did you use?
You can use any type of clay to do this. I use low fire, smooth earthenware clay for this, but I've done it with stoneware, I've done it with raku clay, I've done it with all different clay bodies.
Do you know if the dry brush set got mailed?
If the dry brush set got mailed, who's asking?
Linda Randall?
Oh, the brushes themselves. Yeah, the dry brushes, those came in, and anybody who had dry brushes, if you had those dry brush sets, you got an upgrade on that deluxe, that ultimate set, because there were some issues with some of the brushes we got in initially, and so we went with a higher grade of dry brush, and so some of you really lucked out and got much more expensive brushes than you had originally ordered. But yeah, the brushes, and I don't know for sure if Linda, if your order, we've had so many orders shipping out that I don't know for sure. I can go in after and check, or send me a message and I can check on that.
Okay, and then someone else wanted to know about adding some magazines, and I told them to email you.
Yeah, or just use that FS if you've got an order. You can go onto the website, enter the order for the magazines, and use that FS100. If your original order qualified for free shipping, we can combine that. And then just put in the comments, just put a note to combine it with your other order, and that'll alert me to look for that other order then and match them up.
Is speckled clay okay?
Yep, speckled clay is fine. Yep.
Okay. All right. I think we're good.
All right. If you have other questions, message me or put them in here. I usually try to keep an eye out for other messages that pop in here, and I will try to get back to you as quickly as I can. The emails coming in. Mike usually
spend quite a bit of time after the live looking over all the comments to see if I missed anything.
Yeah. I try to go through, but sometimes there's hundreds and hundreds of comments. So if I don't get to it tonight, I'll probably get to it tomorrow or the next day. All right. Thanks for joining us tonight, guys, and I will see you in 2 weeks. I don't know what I'm doing yet in 2 weeks, but I will have something exciting. We've got retreat next week, and I'm going to be showing all kinds of new techniques there, and I might share some of that the following week during our live. So take care, and we will see you in 2 weeks.